Hello everyone, welcome to this session on 5G vendor selection and deployment options in the manufacturing space. My name is James Blackman. I'm editor at Enterprise IoT Insights. We have 40 minutes today and a frankly kind of mad topic area, so we're going to fit in as much as we can. I'd like to introduce the panel for this session. We have with us Kangru, who's technologist in the CTO office at Viavi Solutions, Erin Liao, who's head of end-to-end 5G systems at Ericsson, Dr. Claudius Noack, IT consultant with Lufthansa Industry Solutions, and Jefferson Wang, who is global 5G lead with Accenture. Thank you all for joining us. Let's start with Erin. Erin, so this is kind of a double header, if you like. Firstly, just as a kind of a way into this topic, can you set the scene and explain why private 5G kind of holds such excitement, for the manufacturing sector? And secondly, can you briefly explain, Ericsson's go-to-market strategy with private 5G? Because, there's a perception which is perhaps a little old now that you would, you prefer to sell 5G directly. You prefer not to sell directly to enterprises without kind of carrier say-so type thing. And this is something you will have heard, but just put us right on that if you can.
Sure, thank you. First of all, pleasure to be here today. I'm Erin Liao. 5G is projected to bring $700 billion increase in manufacturing GDP in the next 10 years. That put manufacturing as the sector that will benefit the most from 5G implementation. So why the excitement? I see two main reasons. Number one, it has the most obvious use case as low-hanging fruit that could achieve the fastest ROI, return on investment, in typically 18 months, and probably the highest ROI as well. Number two is the sheer number of manufacturing facilities out there worldwide. When you add them up, it probably outnumbered the total of cell sites that's currently existing worldwide. Now, Ericsson, as a telecom vendor and manufacturer, walks the talk. We invested $100 million in a 300,000 square foot facility in Louisville, Texas, as our 5G smart factory to manufacture 5G equipment by utilizing 5G technology. And that has received a prestigious recognition from World Economic Forum as the lighthouse for Industry 4.0. So now getting to the second part of your question, James, about the go-to-market strategy, Ericsson is taking a very practical approach in terms of go-to-market. When it comes to establishing the private network, the first question you ask is not about which vendor that you work with. The first question you ask about is spectrum, which spectrum you get to use. And spectrum largely has been owned by operators. So operators historically has a good combination of spectrums, low band, mid band, high band, to adjust to the different needs of networks. Also coupled with the expertise that operators has in terms of deploying cellular network, that makes operators as a preferred partner to start with in terms of starting a private network. However, as shared spectrum, such as CBRS in the US, is becoming more available and starts to become more mature with the ecosystem, Ericsson is also speeding up to build the enterprise business. And one good example is the acquisition of Cradlepoint. Cradlepoint is a leader to address the connectivity in the enterprise space and brought many channel partners to Ericsson. So today, Ericsson serves more than 6,000 enterprises, either through operators or directly with enterprises.
Okay, Erin, thank you. Thank you, Jefferson. I've got another two-part, which is, it was along similar lines, another go-to-market thing. But just firstly, just put in context the role of, the public 5G infrastructure, what role that plays with manufacturing, something on the future with slicing, this kind of stuff. And then just clarify, likewise, if you can briefly, the Accenture go-to-market strategy, because you, of course, are, selling digital change to enterprises and to carriers at the same time. So just, how do you walk the line on that?
Yeah, absolutely, James. So I think part one is the importance of the public network, comes down to really kind of location as one of the biggest discussions, and then options, which is the second discussion. When you look at kind of locations, when you think about a public slice, is the actual manufacturing plant, is the location reachable first off by that, and if it is, absolutely, that becomes the first part of the conversation on how to dedicate all of those resources from the actual radio to the actual transport to the core, and actually dedicating that piece. I think, though, it's interesting to think about kind of what the options are if that manufacturing plant is not reachable by a public network, and how have we seen the uptake in those private networks, specifically private cellular networks, that are able to also fit the bill. And we're starting to see more of a surgical relationship there. When you think about kind of the opportunity, regardless, it's how do we help these manufacturing plants kind of break free from shielded Ethernet? And shielded Ethernet's done an incredible job across pulling connectivity and providing data into the continuum. But thinking through the flexibility, the modularity of bringing a wireless solution into it becomes incredibly compelling if you actually add reliability to it, security to it, and resiliency to it. So that is the interesting opportunity, right? Thinking about shielded Ethernet is ingrained. It's absolutely important. We'll continue on. But what are the opportunities of actually a wireless solution in the manufacturing plant? And, can talk through a couple of use cases around worker safety. We're working with one of the largest manufacturing plants around worker safety, and using kind of a wireless solution on a private network with an edge solution to be able to do worker safety better. And you can actually adapt that same tech stack to other things like raw material savings and not losing those things. So it's really aligning the technology to what matters for the manufacturing plant, number of shifts you can run, safety of the workers, productivity and agility of the line, and those things. So it's pretty important to kind of take a look at all those aspects.
Sorry, I'm muted there. Claudius, just talk around the Lufthansa Industry Solutions proposition, because you are a system integrator rather than an enterprise user as such. So talk around that, and talk around the interest you're seeing, in the German manufacturing sector and elsewhere. Does it reflect the hype, or is the telecoms industry kind of overplaying its hand, if you like?
Yeah, thanks, James. Thanks for having me. We've been building networks for 5G networks for 2 years now, and there's still a hype about all those fancy features that 5G will bring, and not just right now. This is not just fueled by the MNOs, as you talked about, but also some tech media. We from Lufthansa Industry Solutions are, on the other hand, very much down to earth. We see ourselves as solution providers. So if there is a problem, we just use the best technology there is on the market. And that means you continuously have to check what 5G can offer right now, like in this year, in 2021, or next year, 2022, but not in the next release or over next year release. And therefore, you need to have that real industrial experience with 5G that we've gained over the last years, and over building and maintaining 5G networks. And you know what? Sometimes maybe 5G is not the best solution for that case. So we are very open-minded when it comes to that technology.
And Claudius, just very quickly, and we've talked at length about this, and there's lots to say, of course, but you've gone down both routes, and famously you've done it in the same kind of airport hangar in Hamburg. But what are the pros and cons both ways of going with a vendor, a network equipment vendor, and a mobile operator?
So yes, James, we have like a big base here in Hamburg where we tried out 5G at first, or not just tried out, we're using it as a business case for maintaining aircraft parts. And we built it in one hangar with a vendor and in another hangar without a vendor. And for that specific use case, where we are indoor using our own frequency, we actually haven't seen the big advantages of a vendor. But there are other projects that we've tackled and that we've done in the past. For example, if you're going outside, if you're roaming from indoor to outdoor, if you want to make calls over your network as well, there are very much reasons for using an MNO. So again, that is why you need guys who really know what specific setup is the best for your technical problem. And that's the middleman. And the middleman in this case is Lufthansa Industry Solutions, who has that experience.
Great, thank you. And Per, just to move it on a little bit, what do you make of this kind of supply side dynamic in the private 5G market? Because there's an argument that, which does the rounds, that running one national network one way for one customer type is very different from running it millions of ways for millions of customers. Just what in your opinion do the traditional operator set bring to the table here?
It's a very good question. So a little bit earlier today, I spoke as well around that. This is as well to understand and align what the traditional operators do well, which is to procure infrastructure, operate it, and amortize that investment over a period of time. That period of time is most probably longer than most enterprises would be able to amortize that same investment over. That means that if it's done properly, you're actually able to deliver it more cost efficiently. Then this question about can we do it in millions of ways for millions of different customers, which really moves into the discussion about automation. So is 5G having a requirement for driving things in an automated manner if you're a mobile operator building that up? And the short answer is yes. So as you're going through the operational paradigms, and if you automate it, and if you have the right automation engine with the right assurance solutions on top of that, you really end up with something that, yes, you can as a mobile operator run one big infrastructure across a nationwide country in a million different ways. Obviously, you have to know that that stuff works. You have to have the ability to validate it across the board and work it through. But if you do that well, yes, you can. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And Erin, just to move on again, talk about the challenge you face to shrink down, the network for enterprises from a kind of a, selling a macro network for national coverage to a local area network, for private coverage. What do you keep and what do you leave out of that? And on the other side, you're bringing in other stuff. You're bringing in edge componentry and applications and all this kind of stuff, and bundling up that. Just talk through that challenge, if you like.
Yeah, sure. It's not so much of a technical challenge, but rather it's targeted offering. So when we take a step back and think about what's the basic needs of manufacturing facilities, it's the connectivity. And then through connectivity and coverage, it can achieve the automation for operational efficiency. And better yet, integration to the existing IT infrastructure. Those are the basics. So if I were to summarize what manufacturing companies or enterprise would be looking for from a private network, there are three keys: simplicity, flexibility, and scalability. Now, Ericsson, back in June 2021, unveiled its private 5G portfolio. It employs a network in the box kind of integrated offering to address those three key points. So let's start with simplicity. Now, imagine that you have a network in the box that can be installed within hours at any facilities. And if we need to, it can be scaled for larger coverage areas when needed in the future. But to start with, it's that simplicity for installation that would be key to start a private network. Now, moving on to flexibility. So what it will need would also be offering APIs to existing IT and operational technology with the customer's business, and the value packages for the functionalities, James, you just mentioned, such as edge, such as low latency, such as analytics. Recognizing that not all manufacturing companies want the same value packages, this has to be an add-on with the flexibility. And then finally, scalability. It also has access to Ericsson's large radio portfolio in the future for covering larger areas for scalability. And this kind of offering is primarily targeting manufacturing, utilities, mining, seaports, airports, but it also could be used for many other use cases as well.
Okay. And Jefferson, if we split the kind of the process here, the private 5G piece into three phases, into a kind of a sell phase, a build phase, and a run phase, and we first look at the kind of sell and build phases, who should be in charge of those? Do you see who should enterprises go to? Why and when should they choose an operator, a vendor, an SI, a hyperscaler even? Can you talk around that?
Yeah, I think it depends on the situation and who the client's most comfortable with, right? In the end, we like to talk about kind of what's the business rationale behind this. And that's one of the most important things to consider. that there might be a company that's already working with you on digital transformation that may not include 5G per se as a technology solution, but it's really, hey, let's digitize the business, let's automate some of these processes, let's figure out some of these business results and bring that business case up to the board and then get the investment envelope that comes back. But there might be other situations where you're very comfortable starting from connectivity and you've already gotten used to buying SIMs at scale. You've already gotten used to buying your connectivity from a certain provider, and it's natural for them to bring another SKU, if you will. That SKU might be a network or a compute or storage or something else. And then there's probably something in the middle where there's a majority of the clients that are saying, listen, I do have a thesis that there needs to be more connectivity that's reliable and secure, and that it has to start with a certain positioning. But then that comes down to trust, right? Who do you trust and who have you worked with to be able to not have a potential agenda, but basically want to solve your business problems? I think there's room for everybody. That's the important part, that we always kind of try and, pit this, is it operators against NEPs? Is it NEPs against SIs? And it's really not, right? In the end, there's so many enterprises out there. There's so many different problems on the manufacturing side to be able to solve. We should be all be able to figure this out. But I really think it comes down to, clarity of the actual business problem. And then we find the technology components to be able to solve that.
Okay, so I mean, if it's not really, vendors versus operators versus SIs or whatever, Claudius, I mean, there's still a journey going on, right? And the telecom side is coming into manufacturing, afresh, really. Just talk around, how these sides are collaborating on the IT OT piece, co-creation, this kind of stuff. Does the telecom set? And I keep reverting back to them, but do they have the domain knowledge to kind of lead the negotiation yet?
James, their customer used to be end users, normal end users, millions of them, or billions actually in the whole world of them. And now it's just a couple. Even if you're talking as, let's say, Lufthansa as a customer, we have over 100,000 employees, but it's only one customer. It's only that one big customer. So now they need to fully understand the problem that specific one customer has. And it's totally different from the one. So what they try to do, especially in the last 2 years, I think they're changing now. And I'm not just talking about telcos. You just heard Erin, how they changed their processes now to fit specific needs. Because in the past, what they've done is they have that big solution. They try to shrink it down so that it fits into that industry. But it's not just about shrinking a big solution down. It's about really creating or crafting a solution that fits to that specific industry. There are some other players. We usually talk about the big ones, but there are some other smaller players who were always focused on smaller industry, who know the industry stuff. And this is not right now, at least. I think it's changing right now, but it's not what the MNOs and NSPs in the last, 2 or 3 years have done. So what we are doing right now, we try to focus, and this is really important. I know you hear a lot about use cases, and you have to try to find the right use case. For me, it's different. It's other way around. If there is a use case, you really need to understand that specific use case and then try to draw the network picture around it. For example, an MNO might try to sell you that specific picture of network. You need, you need a non-standalone for this, or you definitely need so many radios. No, it might not be the correct solution for this. So we try to draw this network picture for our industrial customer. And this is very, very important, that this picture, this network picture, is different from one industry to another industry. And I think this is a learning phase right now for vendors, for NSPs, for all those big players on the market, and even the small players on the market. And we are in the middle of it. And I'm really looking forward what will happen in the next 2 or 3 years. Aaron's talking about a box deploying in a couple hours, and this is really what we want. We had, given small anecdote, we had 2 different networks on that one side. That one network took many days to deploy, and the other network was deployed within a couple of hours. And this is exactly, I totally agree with Erin on that one. This is what we need, a small, scalable network that fits our needs.
Okay. And I mean, obviously we're at a learning stage, but I mean, Per, talk about, the run phase, which is perhaps a little futuristic, at least in 5G terms at the moment, but, the network management of this stuff and what Viavi offers in terms of 5G monitoring, and why this is important with network slicing coming down the line and performance SLAs and this kind of stuff, and just for enterprises really to know they're getting what they've paid for?
Yes, this is partly a new question, partly an old question. So we already historically done this, for example, for the optical space. So people buy an optical end-to-end connectivity and from an operator, and then they're basically getting that between point A and point B. And already today, they can log into various systems and get access to the performance of that. Similarly, if someone is today an enterprise customer to an MNO, and they basically have an enterprise set of SIM cards scattered across the country, they can log in and see what's the experience of that enterprise customer base across that nationwide network. So moving this into a private space, and which you might happen to deliver through a network slicing, is conceptually not different. It's just an evolution of the same level of visibility. You just choose to measure certain other things, and you have certain well-defined characteristics and KPIs of what you're measuring. So what's important here is to see, how do I take this from something that someone can log into and visually look at, maybe to do some SLA management and so on as of today, to doing something that is integrated into the IT service management of that enterprise. So that when you as a mobile operator see that, oh, I would, for example, not be able to deliver a perfect experience according to my contract based upon predictive capacity management at some point in the next 24 hours, being able then to predictively communicate that to your customer so that you can start setting expectations. Because setting those expectations will not halt that manufacturing equipment at the wrong time, but it will allow the customer to manage around it. So the ability to do connect assurance, metrics, and KPI monitoring to many people talk about e-bonding or other things from an ITSM point of view. This is where we see the next generation of that run phase. And it doesn't necessarily matter if it is a private network or whether it's an evolution of extensive and existing enterprise environments.
Okay, and Erin, on this run phase, I don't know if you can be specific, but do you have a sense of the kind of percentage of companies that will manage their 5G networks by themselves and the percentage that will outsource to third parties? And I guess there's a question about how much of that outsourcing goes to operators and to the likes of Ericsson and everyone else. And then related, how does that model change between, smaller and larger enterprises and kind of non-critical and critical enterprises?
Yeah, so let's start with the build phase, because it's when the operator and network vendors are expected to be heavily involved. And here I wanted to cite a survey done by Omdia with 450 global enterprises with multiple verticals, and just published last month, that during the build phase, the operators together with the network vendors overwhelmingly are preferred and trusted to be the partner to build and start the private networks. That's 60% of the private networks. However, it is important to keep in mind that managing during the run phase, managing and maintaining the private network is part of the wider enterprise decision. And as such, enterprises such as manufacturing companies may want to manage and maintain its own network. And we expect that percentage to manage and maintain the private network themselves to rise to about 40 to 50% during the run phase. But ultimately, the decision about whether to manage the 5G private network themselves is largely determined by three factors. Number one is the complexity of the network. Is the network fully private? Is the network a hybrid, therefore sharing a network element with the public network, such as shared RAN, such as shared core, that all contribute to the complexity of the network. Number two, the criticality of the network. Is it mission critical and therefore having low tolerance of any kind of network issues that could potentially result into catastrophe or fatality? So these are all important considering factors about whether to manage the 5G private networks by themselves. Number three, the in-house skills of the enterprise's IT team. Therefore, training and upskilling of the workforce is top of mind of many leaders from almost every industry.
Okay, and I feel like I'm jumping around a bit here, but you know, going back to kind of performance SLAs and stuff, some of the stuff Per touched on, you know, Jefferson, talk around, you know, I mean, 5G is very new still, so presumably there's not a whole lot of this going on, but there is in LTE, and you know, and I wonder, you know, that's where the action is, and you know, what are you seeing in terms of the kind of SLAs going into those networks, and are they being written in fact into the kind of build phase contracts in terms of redundancy and this kind of stuff? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, SLAs are an incredibly hot topic right now from an overall perspective. I mean, you kind of look at the shift of, you know, from a manufacturing perspective, moving from like MPLS to like a dedicated data center, and now the shift to broadband, and there's a lack of an SLA to an extent on broadband. I think, you know, defining SLAs in stages is really important to the way you described it, and thinking about it on, you know, initially, you know, what is the response time? What is the ticket closure time? What are the pieces that are controllable today from an SLA are important, and then moving it broader to a more stronger SLA when you think about the actual end-to-end reliability of the entire network, right? I mean, if you look at just, you started the first question around network slicing, right, James? I mean, that is pulling together a much different animal than we've dealt with before as an industry overall, right? Now you've got sales tied to network, tied to IT, tied to customer service at the end of it, right? And getting all those parties in an enterprise to just agree to an SLA is actually quite daunting, quite difficult. If you look at, you know, Accenture, we're a $50 billion company, and, you know, 20% of our revenue is with the comms providers figuring this out and trying to understand how to get all the parties to work together to provide a network slice in order to sign an SLA out to it, right? That was a big part of the actual business case. And then, you know, the other 80% of revenue is with the other industries and enterprise players out there, and trying to make sure that we're designing in from the beginning and figuring out what is feasible at this point, and how do we actually move from a very SLA heavy kind of MPLS situation to kind of this new world where you're getting tons of benefits. You're getting flexibility, you're getting additional capacity, you're getting lower latency, you're getting a lot of other things, but you do have to worry about these trade-offs. And, you know, it's important to work that out together.
Claudius, two questions for you. The first, very quickly, how is the availability of release 16 devices currently? And, you know, secondly, and perhaps more important, what are you finding on the ground in terms of, you know, the application requirements and the network performance of URLLC, ultra reliable, low latency comms? You know, what are the key metrics enterprises want, and what is 5G delivering in its kind of current state?
Yeah, so let's talk about that bottleneck that you were talking about, this 5G end devices or industrial end devices. It's still a big bottleneck, or a small bottleneck, however you call it. My favorite example actually is the iPhone. So when it came to the market, or just before it came to the market, we were all very happy because some of our use cases were in the need of an iPhone because of the application that we wrote for it. And then the iPhone came out. Yeah, it doesn't work. It does not work on a private network with a private PML ID. And that is the problem. It might work, or it does work on our frequency. It does even work on a standalone network, but not on the private network with a private PML ID. So whenever you test a new device, you need to check, is it working on your frequency? Is it working on standalone or non-standalone? Because there are some devices that would not work on non-standalone again. Those things have to be tested. That is why we are testing as much as we can. We are even partnering with those device manufacturing to let them test in our hangar in Hamburg to see how good they are working, what kind of KPIs they do well, what kind of KPIs they do not well. And this is actually tied to that second question, because you were talking about URLIC and how important is that to the real market. You know, our project that we've done, the many projects or the 5G network that we've deployed, they were about coverage, they were about connectivity, stability, and security. They were not so much about that 1 millisecond. Let me give you one brief example. There's this There's a use case that we have. You need a 12-hour data stream, continuous 12-hour data stream. You don't need that with a gigabit per second. You don't need that with 1 millisecond latency. You just need it continuously. But most people talk about, oh, I need that 1 gigabit per second download speed, or I need that sub 10 milliseconds latency, but they are talking about average numbers usually. Let's talk about that latency. It's not about that average in that 12 numbers that is very important for me. If I have that 12-hour data stream, and I'm talking about a video stream with high quality 4K video stream where I'm looking at sub-millimeter scratches, if I have 1 second where the latency is, let's say, 150 milliseconds, that is really bad for my algorithm because it will shrink down and you'll get some artifacts and stuff. So it's not just about that average, it's about the peaks that you see in latency. It's about the drops that you see in the throughput and stuff like that. So right now, the use cases that we really have is about stable connectivity where you won't have normal connectivity. So in remote indoor areas where you won't get public 4G or 5G and where you won't have Wi-Fi because the area is too wide, and we have those use cases, then that's where we deploy. And again, you need to look what solution is correct for you and try to find somebody who knows that.
And Per, just to round it off here, the subtext with a lot of this is, with Open RAN and self-optimizing networks and simplified core networks, and these kind of things you touched on already, really. But is the discipline of network as the discipline of network management gets simpler, is it getting to the point it becomes like managing an enterprise Wi-Fi network, which is been managed mostly in-house? And do enterprises in the end even need a third party for more than emergency issue resolution and this kind of stuff?
Very interesting question, and I think it's really about understanding the aspects of that. So how you get to a fully self-operating or close to self-organizing network that works well is by being able to deal with the smaller and bigger problems that end up in an automated manner. Many of those things are relatively straightforward to deal with. And as long as your network have limited amount of complexity and you have an ability to potentially over-dimension it compared to what you would do in an MNO's network where they have to deal with huge coverage area, and over-dimensioning of that becomes very expensive. Then at that point, there might be enough problems that you can actually solve easy enough. The challenge and where we are seeing it is that in order to deal with this, you have to have a consistent evolution of software updates. And if you have a multi-vendor environment with one ORU from one vendor and an ODU from a different vendor and a core network from a third vendor, and if each of these are giving you a software drop every third week or something like that, and you need to have these integrated, that's a continuous integration, continuous deployment loop, which someone needs to manage. So even if the operational phase of running it is stable enough, being able to take those drops, which might contain security updates, it might contain new front haul updates, etc., remember that the O-RAN specs are still very immature. Many parts of the O-RAN spec does not at all have the same maturity or the same level of detail and sophistication as an ETSI or 3GPP spec today. And that really means that there's going to be a significant amount of updates. Those updates needs to roll into the equipment, and that's not going to happen without significant effort. So operations might be easy, but the continuous delivery, continuous deployment of that is not going to be easy. So you can choose to work with an SI, that SI can take the pain for you, but then they will send you an invoice for that. So you have to pay one way or the other.
Okay, and I mean, just to finish up, we've had a question in for Erin at Ericsson. I wonder if I can put this to you, Erin. It's around what you're doing in your own kind of smart factories there in Texas, I believe, put me right on that. But the question is, what benefits have you seen from this? Can you talk around stuff, in terms of output, safety, productivity, this kind of stuff? Are you seeing tangible benefits come through already?
Yeah, Absolutely. And actually, there are benefits in many fronts. Number one is the operational efficiency improvement. We have seen 24% improvements in that area. We also are very keen about sustainability. So in this factory in Texas, we actually employed a lot of environmental management and sustainability measure, and we were able to generate 17% of the power by the on-site solar panel, for example. So this is an exemplary factory of the future that could employ 5G technology and address many different areas, the traditional operational efficiency through automation, as well as sustainability.
Okay. All right. Look, that is about all we've got time for. I'd like to thank our panel today for joining us, and you know, fascinating discussion. It's a difficult topic, and I think you know, it's lots going on, and we appreciate your time and your insight on that. So thanks very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much.